Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today our group will represent a safe work procedure using a HIRAC, which is a hazard identification, risk assessment and risk control. First of all, let me see our group members. The first one is Azri Haikal bin Azami, Awis Al-Qurni bin Fakrul Razi, Durrani Muslim bin Ahmad Tajuddin, Muhammad Adik bin Kamal, Muhammad Zulharmi Takzim bin Kamal Zaman, and the last one is Zaiman bin Muzani. Next, introduction. First of all, let me see the objectives of OSHA first. The first one is to analyze the likelihood and severity of accidents that could happen at work, as well as the source of hazards. The second one is to eliminate or reduce the likelihood of accidents by implementing the HIRAC. Okay, what is actually HIRAC? HIRAC is an acronym for Hazard Identification, Risk Evaluation and Risk Control. It is a systematic approach used to identify and manage workplace hazards to ensure employee safety and health. The second one is HIRAC is a fundamental component of occupational safety and health management systems and is widely utilized in a variety of industries to evaluate and control risks associated with work activities. Okay, what is the advantage of HIRAC? HIRAC enables organizations to take a proactive approach to safety by carefully identifying and assessing hazards prior to the occurrence of incidents. The second one is HIRAC provides a structured framework for identifying a broad variety of potential workplace hazards. And the last one is HIRAC assists organizations in ranking hazards according to their severity and frequency of occurrence to happen.
Now we will move on to Table 1. First of all, in number 1 task, working with chemical substance. As we know that the hazard from this statement was obviously the chemical that have risk of corrosive in it. The existing risk control that are found in the laboratory was wearing a rubber glove. Therefore, I recommended the control measure for this was wearing a full body protection such as glove, face shields and apron to prevent chemical substance touch our skin. Second, on the number 2, the task was handling flammable substance. The hazard for this was flames. The risk of it is fatal injuries. The existing risk control for this was the fire extinguisher is provided by the institution. But I recommend and our team also recommend that we must separate the flammable substance to a place that are far from fire that can cause it burn and causing fatal injuries. The third one, using a sharp objects, as we know that in laboratory there are often sharp objects that used to cut something or anything. So the example for a sharp object was knife. Knife can prevent a cut, which was a risk. And the existing risk control that are found in the laboratory was it was placed in one shelf. But the recommended control measure that can be used was the knife should have their own casing and stored in the doorway to prevent it from falling and causing a damage to a person. As we know that knife is sharp and can anytime cut someone that it touched. The next one was handling heat from furnace. As we know that furnace is very hot and it can give a heat as a hazard. The risk of it was burn our skin. Therefore, the existing risk control that are found in laboratory was labeled the hot area. The hot area of the furnace was labeled to prevent students from come closer to it when it's hot. Therefore, I also recommend the countermeasure which was the hot furnace should have a specific space to prevent students from casually touch it and causing burn to their skin. The last one was disposal of chemical substance. As we know that the chemical substance was hazard, it can become a toxicity because of its mixture and anything that has been mixed in it. The existing risk control that are found in the laboratory was the personal space to place the waste. This is good, but it's not a recommended. The recommended countermeasure was the waste should be disposed outside the campus regularly to prevent the chemical substance from become more toxic and make our environment in the college become toxic and can damage the plant in the institution. That's all from me to the table 1. We will move on to my next one. Thank you.
Hi and Assalamualaikum. My name is Durrani Muslim and Ahmad Tajuddin, and I will be explaining the tables 2 and 3. So table 2 is the probability or likelihood table, and in safety, probability means the likelihood of an accident happening with a given hazard. So as everyone can see in table 2 here, the probability is given in 5 different stages, starting from very unlikely, which means that it is practically difficult and only occurs on specific conditions, and is given a score of 1. So the second stage is called unlikely, which means that it is anticipated to occur rarely, and is given a score of 2. And the third stage is possible, which means that sometimes it may occur, the accident may occur, and it is given a score of 3. The third stage is likely, which is bound to occur often, and is given a score of 4. And the last stage is very likely, which is most likely to occur at all times, and is given a score of 5. So table 3 is the severity table. So severity in safety means the amount of damage or harm a hazard could create. So as we can see here in table 3, severity is given in 4 different stages, starting with negligible, which means that only a few minor wounds, bruises, and first type A injuries, and is given a score of 1. So the second stage is minor, which means that it causes impairment but not permanent damage, and is given a score of 2. The next stage is major, which means harm without fatality and permanent disability, and is given a score of 3. So the last stage is fatal or fatality, which means that in approximately a single fatality, property damage in the single event of a hazard, and is given a score of 4.
For the next slide is table 4. Table 4 is about risk matrix table. So, risk matrix table is a visual tool used to assess and prioritize risk based on their probability and impact. It provides a structured framework for evaluating risk and help in decision making for a risk management strategy. So, how do we use this table? We can see the severity. So, the fatal, major, minor, and negligible have their value, and also likelihood. Very likely, likely, possible, and unlikely, and very unlikely. So how to get the value? We can see the fatal is 4 and the value likelihood is 5. So 4 times 5 we get 20. That's how we use the risk matrix table. For the next slide is table 5. Table 5 is about risk value. So the risk value for 15 until 20 is high. So the action we need to do is immediate action is required to control the measure, and also the hazard should be eliminated before any work start. So the next value 5 until 12 is a medium. So the action we need to do is implementation of risk control measure is needed to contain the hazard while longer term measures are being established, and management attention is required. Next, for the value 1 until 4 is low. So the action we need to do is additional risk control measure may not be needed, and frequent review and monitoring of the hazard are required to ensure that the risk level assigned is accurate and does not increase over the time. So these are table 5 risk value.
Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is Muhammad Adi bin Kamal, and I am going to present my part of the assignment, which is table 6, multi-risk entry form, MREF. The first work activity is working with chemical substance. This activity has got likelihood of 5 and severity of 2, and the risk value, which is likelihood times severity, and we got 10. For second work activity is handling flammable substance, which got likelihood of 4 and severity is also 4. So we got the risk value will be 16. For the third work activity, which is using sharp object, that got likelihood of 3 and severity of 1, and the risk value will be 3. The fourth work activity is handling heat from the furnace, which is got likelihood of 3 and severity of 2, and score of risk value of 6. For the last one, disposal chemical substance, that score likelihood of 3 and severity of 3, and the risk value will be 9.
Next, let's see a table 7, which is this table lists the ranking of the hazard that must occur in the workplace. The first one is handling flammable substance. The risk value is 16. The task is at high risk. The hazard must be eliminated immediately by separating the flammable source far from the fire to prevent burning that can cause fatal injuries. The second one is to working with chemical substance. The risk value is 10. The task is at medium risk. The risk can be avoided by wearing a body protection such as gloves to prevent chemical to touch our skin. The third one is disposal chemical substance. The risk value is 9. The task is at medium risk. The workers should dispose the chemical waste correctly to prevent the workplace exposed to the toxic. The fourth one is handling heat from furnace. The risk value is 6. The task is at medium risk. Hot furnace should be placed far from the crowded space and must be clearly labeled as a hot source. And the last one is using a sharp object. The risk value is 3. The task is at low risk. The sharp object should be placed in closed container or stored in the drawer to prevent it from falling on the person.
What is standard operating procedure? An SOP is a procedure specific to your operations that describes the activity necessary to complete tasks in accordance with industry regulations, provincial law, or even just your own standards for running your business. Okay, now let me see first standard operating procedure or SOP for flammable substance. The procedure is first, store flammable substance in designated flammable storage cabinet away from ignition source. Second, use spark-proof equipment and properly grounded electrical connections. Conduct regular inspections of storage areas and equipment for potential hazards. Lastly, ensure the availability and proper functioning of the fire extinguisher. Next, for SOP for working with chemical substance are first, ensure the availability of the safety datasheet SDS for all chemical users in the laboratory. Second, follow proper storage handling and labeling procedure for each chemicals. And the third, use appropriate personal protective equipment PPE such as gloves, lab coats, goggles and respiratory protections. We must train personnel on the safe use, storage and disposal of chemical substance. Standard operating procedure for disposal chemical substance are first, segregate hazardous waste according to compatibility and labeling requirements. Second, use appropriate container for storing and transporting hazardous waste. And the third, clearly label waste containers which contains hazard warnings and accumulation state. Arrange for proper disposal throughout licensed waste management facilities. Document waste disposal activity and maintain record as required. We will see SOP of heat from furnace. The SOP are ensure proper installations, operations and maintenance of the furnace equipment. Second, by establish clear operating procedure for the furnace, including start-up and shutdown protocols. Provide adequate ventilation and consider the use of heat-resistant barriers or shielding. And then regularly inspect and clean the furnace and associated components. Last SOP is for sharp objects. First, handle sharp object with caution and use appropriate tools for manipulations. Second, dispose of sharps in puncture-resistant container labeled for sharp disposal. Implements proper procedures for cleaning, decontaminating and storing sharp equipment. And lastly, by maintains a sharp injury prevention program, including reporting and follow-up protocols.